right, why don't we get started? My name is Jim Storer. I'm one of the co-founders of the Community Roundtable, and I'm really excited to have you all here today. This is the kickoff for Tech Thursdays, which, if you weren't with us last year, we did an entire month of technology-focused activities with our Connect event. And feedback we got from both attendees and our partners was they didn't want to wait till October. So they wanted to be able to have these conversations and kind of explore the different solutions that are out there throughout the year. So we're kicking it off here at the beginning of June, and these sessions are going to run all the way through the end of October. So we're really excited. We've got an incredible series, and we keep adding new sessions every day, every week. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to go to techthursdays2021.com, and someone on my team will put the link right into the chat. But I encourage you to go there and register if you haven't already, because it's a great way to stay in touch with the different sessions that are going on. And we have a number of amazing connections experiences. This is something that we debuted last year, and people were really, really excited about them. So get in there. There you can virtually swim with a shark researcher. You can take a coffee masterclass. There's lots of different ways to connect with different people who are a part of the events. So get in there and be a part of that. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you about? Throughout the next few months, we're going to be doing a lot more panels. We're going to be doing case studies. We'll be doing a lot of product demos and those connections experiences that I mentioned. So we look forward to you taking part in those throughout the rest of the year. Now on to today's panel. I want to thank everybody who is supporting this. You can see on the slide right now all the different partners that are working with us to bring you this content. We appreciate them being committed to the space and helping to support Tech Thursdays. And today we are going to be focusing on a panel that we recorded with, let's see, we recorded it with James Willey from HigherLogic, Jen Snell from Verint, and Maximo Castagno from Beezy. And we recorded this just over a week ago. We found that the recording is a great way to give you the opportunity to ask questions throughout the panel. So if you hear something that we're talking about and you want to ask an additional question, those folks are here. And I think Jen was not able to make it, but we do have John from Verint here who can help answer those questions if you want to direct them to anything that Jen says. But with that, I think I'm going to get us started, and I look forward to the Q&A period at the end. We have about 45 minutes of content, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions that we're not able to answer in line during the recording. All right, let's get started. My name is Jim Storer, and I'm here from the Community Roundtable, and I'm thrilled to be here with James, Jen, and Maximo, and we're going to kick things off, the Future of Communities panel, by asking them to introduce themselves and also tell us a little bit about what you see as the biggest change over the last year in the community technology space. So, James, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. First of all, everyone, I'm James Willey. I'm the Chief Product Officer at HigherLogic. I've been with HigherLogic around 2 years, actually 2 years last week. I'm living the virtual world right now, like many of you. And I think for me, what a year, right? When I'm talking about today and rewinding the clock, I think for me, the most fundamental difference is the circumstances we all have been living in. The notion of communication, conversations, and ultimately engagement have now become part of the forefront of the conversation, whereas some of these things might have been nice to have, want to have, I know I need it, I'm not sure how I can prove I need it. Knowing that we have a federated world, people in different places and different things, bringing them together makes it significantly more valuable. And I think also part of that has been seeing how the notion of a community becomes part of that CX lifecycle. We know it's more than support. It's more than just those conversations. It's about learning, discovery, shared outcomes, and how all of those things sort of mash together. And of course, we all know that that's really what a community is all about.
Awesome, Jen.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for having me. I'm Jen Snell. I am the Vice President of Product Strategy and Marketing for Verint, focused on the self-service technologies. So I work within artificial intelligence, conversational AI, the community, adaptive fraud, voice biometrics, really the pretty fun stuff there. For community right now, it's like, for me, it's one of the hottest topics out there. We went from, just like we were saying earlier, like kind of nebulous ideas around community and what was needed within the business, to all of a sudden this world where people were isolated and they were looking for connections, and brands were able to quickly capitalize on that. Self-service has become really important, and being able to be there for your customers, not only your customers, but also your employees. So it's both of those use cases have become very front and center. We're seeing more interest in the mainstream media around community. We're seeing more interest around the industry analyst community talking about communities. So I think that there's been a catapult not only in usage and deployments for that, but also in others recognizing how important this technology is for brands as they move forward.
We're in the midst of working on our state of community management research right now, and we are seeing a pretty big uptick in executive interest and acknowledgement that this is the future. So looking forward to continuing this conversation. Maximo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maximo Castaño. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Beezy. I've been with Beezy since the beginning. I'm a co-founder as well. I'm a sociologist that ended up in the technology sector and working with the social kind of oriented tools. So that's kind of my short story. Basically, what we've seen during this last year, at least from our product perspective, is obviously an acceleration of the conversation, as you mentioned, interest from analysts, from managers, from top management. I think the most interesting part from us was to see how very quickly we needed to kind of plug all the holes in the digital experience of the employee that were not possible anymore. Very simple things like onboarding a new employee. Suddenly you need to tap into your digital tools, but beyond the digital tools, you need to tap into your community. And for employee onboarding, we all know that it's a very effective way of onboarding someone to make it part of the family or part of the work in a very efficient way. So that's just one example of the different use cases that very quickly become front and center. Every company out there needed a digital solution to do something that was not possible anymore. And that was very interesting. And then there is one thing that is kind of the opposite. I also heard some big, large corporations, I will not cite any name here or anything, but they had to shut down their communities for a while. They had to really manage the communication top down like we've never seen in the last 10 years. At least for a few weeks, and make sure that they were in control of everything. So that was also interesting. I lived that process in some large organizations, and that was insightful.
That's really interesting. And that was a pandemic related?
Yeah, absolutely. Initiative? Yeah, the mix of the pandemic with the core business and the type of decisions that they were taking. So that mix make more than 2 customers that I know of shut down their community for a limited period.
Interesting. Well, so Jen, let me start with you with our next question around user experience. What are the big kind of changes you're seeing around user experience? And I want you to comment not just on the user experience for members of your platform, but also community managers who may not be classified as quote unquote members, but they're probably the biggest users of your platform, right? They're in there all the time. So what are you doing to make their life easier?
Yeah, I'll start with the end user experience. It's really about, one of the things that we're seeing is shifting from being part of, like from a brand perspective, shifting from being part of a customer journey to really being, with the customer through their life. And so how do make sure that that content is relevant for them, being part of their life as opposed to just part of a journey that the customer is engaging you on. Same kind of goes for the employees as well when that experience comes up, making sure you're hyper relevant, you know them, you're providing that information and those insights and driving that dialogue. And then, from the community manager side, I'd say, everything's moving so quickly. And so the ability to provide them with tools that they can really own from a low code perspective, you're not necessarily reliant on others throughout the organization, but to be able to manage and monitor and move more quickly, and as well as with the insights, be able to take those insights that, you usually with AI driven insights, be able to scale that, understand quickly what's happening, what needs to be done. We've seen that with a lot of our customers specifically over the last year, to be able to not only stand up a community, but also move quickly, provide information quickly, understand what's going on with your audience and your community, and provide that information. So, really low code UI, low code tools, being able to drive conversations through insights. A lot of that information that you're not having to search through that information, but you're really given the power to be empowered to manage that community.
We're going to get back into the low code kind of question, but so I'll put a pin in that one. We'll come back to that. Maximo, how about you on user experience for members and managers of communities?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, and I will also probably pick up on the low code thing. It's fascinating. Well, in Beezy, we kind of have an internal saying or motto or kind of an idea that people don't need more tools, but better tools. We are kind of reaching the point where one more tool and it's going to be a net negative for everyone, not only for the end users. So we really put the focus on making everything more intelligent and more integrated. Those are our two important things at the moment. We are a product that is native to Microsoft 365, so we try to tap as much as possible into the AI of the platform, and that is very accessible, very easy to connect. And that means, making that apps and tools are more aware of what you're talking about. We connect them to third-party tools as well. So we increase the awareness of the content itself into where is this content being generated, who is reading it, etc., etc. So that has been interesting. And then, yes, well, with integration, I would say that the integration side of things is the one that it's making the difference both for end users and for community managers as well. We've seen something with the community managers that we are working with. For example, a big concern of our customers has always been moderation. And we are seeing now artificial intelligence tools that make post-moderation much more efficient. And that helps community managers a lot, because if they can trust their members, knowing that they can be alerted when something is a bit off, it really make them thrive in their moderation or their work, right? So that's been interesting.
Cool. James, what do you have to say about UX for members and managers?
All great points. I think for me, the big word I sort of always come back to is the big push for the user in my world is this notion of contextual, which is a lot of what we're saying is the information that comes to that user is purposed for them, more readily available for them. And a lot of that is the AIs and the tools that we use to derive that content dynamically. Critically important. The role of the community manager is pretty tough, right? There's a lot going on. You're onboarding, you're nurturing, you're moderating, you're doing all of these things, driving advocacy programs, mentors. So building those administrative tools and the automation tools that support that role, so we take the day-to-day task, is a key driver for us, because we know ultimately, though, if they're working on high value work efforts, it pays off, right? And so if we can take some of those other things and wrap around that experience, it's a huge benefit. So streamlining that experience, I agree 1,000%. They are the number one user, absolutely, in terms of making it happen.
Well, you'll make a lot of community managers happy if you can streamline their work and make them much more efficient. So I'm sure there will be questions at the end about how specifically each of you are thinking about that. But let me get to the next question, because I think each of you has used the letters AI in some of your responses, and that's where we want to get to next. So how is AI enhancing or improving or changing the way your platform works? In particular, how you're personalizing the solution for individual users. So maybe Maxima, you can kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, AI for us has been in the agenda for a long time. Also, there was a big appetite for AI in the enterprise, right? What I think had really happened during the last 1-2 years is that we are starting to see some real tangible benefits of it. Let me name one. For example, a few years ago, it was impossible for us to make sure that Beezy could support large scale internal comms module like the one that we have without human-based translation, right? In our product, we have a manual human-based translation, so you are sure that all the corporate messages are properly translated. That shifted the last year, I would say. And now we have customers requiring that by default, all the articles are auto-translated by an engine. And then afterwards, probably some cosmetic changes, you change a little bit this and there, but they trust the system. And we're seeing this also happening at the employee point of view. If you offer auto translation, for example, around the social tools and the community tools, they are really, really using it, and they don't see it works. It just works. That's one example of AI. And then because our product runs natively in SharePoint and in Microsoft 365, we can tap into the Microsoft Graph, as I mentioned before. So we are powering some cool ideas that are not all about AI, but a mix about human nature and AI. For example, we will know who this employee is. We will know who he works with, because there is an API method to retrieve who he works with. And we're going to look at these colleagues' changes in the profile in the last 30 days and offer that change or similar changes in your profile. So you keep your profile updated, just because we picked up your curiosity about these 2 or 3 colleagues that now have a very similar skill that you might have in your profile. So these kind of experiments are really, really now changing the metrics that we get from the product usage and making a big difference.
I think that all of your platforms are doing this today at least a rudimentary level, right? Recommending other people you should follow. I think AI has that opportunity. This is what you started to touch on, is that ability to go even deeper, and based on behaviors within the community, not just like keyword search, but on behaviors, what you're looking at, what you're doing in the community, recommending other people you should be connected to. And internally, that's fascinating from a social network analysis perspective. Externally, anytime you can surface someone who's going to help you do something faster, it's really, really valuable. So let's see, James, can you take this one next?
Yeah, I'll take it. I think I'll give an example of one we've been working on. So how do you take the AI word and translate it into something that brings content to life? And for us, we've been modeling this notion of a newsletter. Sounds incredibly simple, right? And everyone knows what a newsletter is. We've all gotten thousands of product newsletters, but using the system and the power, you're right, Jim, we've used a lot of these tools and pieces, but bringing it together under one feature where we can contextually actually score dynamic content as it's going into the system. We're tracking usage, perceived interest, stated interest, and then we're using the engine to build a dynamic newsletter for every single person. meaning if I'm in accounts payable, I see a learning class about accounts payable. I see document storage about things that are in my area. And then so when I get that newsletter in the morning or once a week or however it's set up, it is truly more meaningful and the likelihood of click-throughs are there. And the other kind of cool thing is we're now able to bring in different data sources than even what might not exist in that community conversation, infuse it with it in that type of construct. So that's where I think it's going. And I said context earlier, and that's sort of what I meant. It's like you now have the ability to go way beyond stated interest, which a lot of us are used to. And literally see who like me is doing something else that I'm not doing. I think that's what Maximo was saying too. We're sort of looking at it the same way.
Got it. Okay, Jen, your chance.
Yeah, I think, without trying to echo what both Maximo and James said, I think those are all really great use cases and where we're applying AI and how we're thinking about it. Other things to think about with AI, right? There's a huge failure rate with AI and just out in the world generally, like 80% of all AI initiatives fail. So, one thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about applying AI and using AI within the community, it's about you have to have good data, and it's incredibly important. And one of the things that a community provides is incredibly rich data about what your users want, what going through the behaviors, but they're pretty explicit about like what they're looking for. And so to be able to scale those insights is really important, but then not only inform across the community, but also you can take those insights and also inform across the business, so you can have an impact beyond just the community into more broadly into the business. And so it really comes down to not only listening and observing, but also highlighting that data and those insights in a very scalable way. And so the community becomes, with all the things that I think we've all discussed, really more scalable, and being able to touch and build and grow relationships with each person as a person.
Interesting. Okay. I have kind of a little bit of a right turn into another community manager issue, and our research consistently shows that member onboarding is a critical area in best-in-class communities. So how are your platforms addressing this? How are your platforms helping community managers in that process of onboarding new members? And James, we'll have you go first this time.
Oh, I get to go first. This is great. I think first and foremost is documenting the best practices that we've seen from lots of community, thousands of communities, in terms of what we're doing and what our internal community managers are doing on behalf of clients on a daily basis. And then building feature support, like I said earlier, to automate it. So we call them automation rules, but they're basically if then do this, right? And in the onboarding space, it's everything from as simple as, Jim, you haven't put your photo up. That's a tell. We know it's a tell. If you put your photo up, you're more likely to stay. If you haven't logged in the first 20 days, we're going to reach out. So it's classically creating automations that are coming from the community manager to help streamline their world. And it feels like it's coming from them, but the goal of it is it's literally a campaign. It's a campaign to do it. It has loopbacks. We're trying to make sure that we're capturing that first initial journey. And then even when we see the lapse off, because that also happens a lot, that those same tools come right back to play and bring it back to life, and hopefully bring them back into the community as well.
So I'm familiar with your automation rules. Are you building bundles that are,
Yep,
that when someone launches a new community, they
yes,
can say, okay, I want to turn on the
yep,
bundle of automation rules for member onboarding?
Yeah, so it goes into like a little bit. Yeah, so we've built, we're calling them models, but imagine a model is a predefined community supporting a use case. So it might be a support reflection model, a thought leadership model. We have numbers of them. And within that world, whereas we have hundreds, and this is a good thing, like we had hundreds of these things. And then it would be tough for a community manager to know what to execute on. In these models for a defined use case, we preload all the ones that we see every single day. They're pre-wired, they're green, meaning they're going to go. And we start from there. And then we also put the others that are complementary that we typically see in the 3, 6 month, 12 months, so that the ideal state is the community manager has a defined roadmap or a play that they're going to run within the space they're in and what the need of their organization is.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, a new community manager with a platform doesn't know what they don't know. So to the extent that your organizations are helping them by building these tools pre-built for certain use cases is really valuable. So Jen, could you take the question about member onboarding next?
Yeah, let me unmute myself. Just like James was saying, it's about, making it easy and very frictionless. And, here's my playbook on how to do this. Other things to be thinking about, right? Visual cues, prompts on, new feature releases, for example, employing some third-party applications where they're applicable, like Pendo, or other things where you can overlay and really drive, continuous education and keeping things moving forward based on building on top of those prompts and the playbooks and all of that. But, just really about keeping it very frictionless and making it simple for the community manager to, intuitively understand what they need to do and how to engage.
Community managers love simple, and if you can make it
we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. Maximo?
Yes, no, all the topics raised are very, very interesting, and also they apply somehow to what we're doing as well. Maybe I would mention that over the last year, one thing that has worked a lot with us is, again, integration. And because we are a product that is very natively integrated in the Microsoft stack, we felt from our customers that we needed to help them go into where their where their employees were already working. So we did the first integration with Teams, with the bot technology that is sometimes proactively reaching out to employees based on some triggers, so they could help on this process of onboarding, follow up a week later, etc., etc. We deployed our app. We have a dedicated app where all these people working in the day-to-day in Teams, they can move from a team channel that is synchronous, very fast and furious, to a Beezy community in a very simple way. And things in a Beezy community will be more relaxed, more asynchronous, more knowledge management oriented, and that is helping a lot. And then more recently, you know that Microsoft released Viva, and one of the components of Viva is Viva Learnings. So we are already kind of jumping into this opportunity of delivering, because Viva Learnings is a Teams app again, to kind of use Teams as yet another channel where you will be helping and giving tools for these community owners to reach the employees wherever they are, with a good tutorial, with something that picks their attention, something that tells them to move the needle to the next stage or something like that. So Teams has been an important component in the last year for us.
And Maximo, I'm going to ask you the next question because it's kind of related. You've talked a lot about integrations and what you've integrated the Beezy solution with. And so for everybody, I want to ask about integrations, and in particular, how do you go from being this standalone kind of isolated community that people need to, go to, set up a profile and interact with, and put the community in the center of, whether it's employees or customers, how do you put it where they are? Like, how are you thinking about that from a product standpoint?
Yes, in that sense, I kept thinking about the answer from James before, of this kind of automation. So if you want to ingrain your communities in your culture and in your day-to-day of your employees and in your business, one idea is to connect the creation and the management of those communities to specific use cases. And that's something that even ourselves, we use our product internally. So we have a process that we have a community to support RFPs, so requests for proposals. And usually the result of an RFP is that either we sell our product to a customer or we don't, right? And all this is somehow related to some automation done with some low-code tools, as Jen mentioned before, that will make that the RFP community will really be supporting the day-to-day of people working on an RFP. But afterwards, that will be converted either into a customer community, if we succeed and we sell our product to that customer, or in a learnings community, because we have a dedicated community to learn from the failures as well. So if you plan for that and you kind of create some basic automation around your real business processes, well, communities will become a reality of your day-to-day.
That's great. Jen, can you take this one?
Yeah, I love that Maximo talked about culture, because it is about building almost a culture of automation or self-service. And so I think as we think about being more front and center and customer centric within our community, it's got to be across the enterprise and the business, and the brand is total, because there's a lot of right now isolated deployments of different capabilities to help support either customers or employees. And so you kind of want to you really want to focus on, how do I engage and sort of bridge between whether it's a chatbot initiative over here to a knowledge management initiative over here, and so on and so forth, and start to bring these things together, so you have these conversations, inform each other on the insights, and really drive towards that culture of self-service. And 2020 really played a big role in brands recognizing this is really important, because all of a sudden all of my employees have to go home, and we're not having those face-to-face conversations. We're not you're not able to just jump up and ask your manager about this. So you have to try to determine, how do I not only scale within my department of managing my community and doing that, but also thinking about, coming together more holistically as a team of, these are the things, and we're trying to communicate with our customers and make it easy for our customers or employees to do business with us and learn from us and be engaged and loyal with us. And I can inform based on my community interactions, maybe more of that knowledge management, and I can inform on, even chatbot or virtual assistant applications, and start to drive that continuous insights across the business. But also, I loved how, when I talked about data earlier being, important about having good data, but also that those integrations are so important as well, because those are bringing in business context as well as situational and personal context to drive more relevancy across. So really starting to build towards that culture of self-service as we mature our solutions, because businesses do recognize the importance of self-service, not only with the community, but also across different initiatives as well. So trying to drive that self-service within the entire organization.
I'm going to go back to culture. I'm going to give James an answer to chance to answer this question, but I want to go back to it because it's so important. And what's the saying? Culture eats strategy for lunch, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
James, I'll give you the floor, and then we'll go back there.
I think, just great comments from both. I think for me, it's also about this notion of, if you think about a community that had no walls. And one of the really interesting things about what communities are to me is, it's where things start. It's where ideas start. It's where support cases really do start. It's where a lot of these, and Maxima pointed it out, the business processes. So, and Jen said it as well. So it's understanding to truly fuse the DNA into an organization or a software organization, whoever you're working with. If those business processes take into account, like my job as a product manager, and I see a conversation turning into an ideation record, and then I see, I need integration, because I'm going to turn that ideation record into an AHA post, or I'm going to turn it into a Jira backend or a Confluence, and having that continuity so that it is fused, literally fused, or it's like the fabric or the foundation of what that organization can be. That's a big part of it. But the other part is, can the community, and should the community, and I think it should, lean the other way, which is push its knowledgeable content out into other places. So it could be feature blog series that show up in .coms, those types of things, and having that capability that then pushes the community presence farther away, that gives another entry point or another place of discovery where the casual user could come in and experience it. And a little bit this year, I've also seen more of, I'd be curious to Jen and Maximo, but I've seen a lot more of communities becoming more open, putting a much wider front door so that more people can come in and discover before they have to hit the click, register, do all those fun things to try to build that value statement up front.
And James, let me be clear. You're saying that it's content syndication from the community to a .com versus something else that a community manager needs to do?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. So for me, it would be if you have the ability to, whether it's APIs or the technology, whatever it is, that a featured blog series that's happening in the community, that you're using your community as its source, and that's where you're creating it. You have, MVPs, or you have advocates that generally live in communities anyway. You bring them to the forefront, and then you use that engine to go out. Because ultimately, I think Jen might have said the notion of brand and the fusions brand across these things is critically important.
So let's go back to culture, and James, I'll give it back to you again. So the concept of culture is so important. I don't think organizations are necessarily thinking about that when they're selecting technology. But what do you see in your clients that, from a culture perspective, that actually makes it easier for them to adopt community approaches? Have you seen some markers of the kind of culture? Is there, if there's an executive listening to this, is there something that a behavior they can change that's going to help their organization be more successful with community?
Yes, I think in the very beginning, the opening, I was talking this notion of the CX life cycle. And the first thing I've seen a lot of is executives start to talk about, they know we have to support from start to renewal, and then renewal and renewal and renewal, right? You have that full life cycle over and over again. And they're looking for ways to build that story and how they're going to support it through conversation and engagement. And when you start having those conversations, I think that's the big game changer for us, in terms of, that tells me we're in the right space, we have the right infrastructure, we're talking to the right things. If someone says, I just want to do just this thing, small thing, although that may be critically important, ultimately, like lowering support cases is one we're all used to, we hear a lot of, right? Critically important, but the bigger story is also what happens when you do that. And you don't want the lurkers, you want people that are truly coming back and learning. So that, for me, first and foremost, was, if I have that type of conversation, I know I'm in the right place.
Got it. Jen, your thoughts on organizations and how, are there archetypes that are really important to being successful with community?
It's such a good question. I do think it comes down to the maturation and evolution of the business, right, and the brand. And as I was talking about earlier, I think brands aspire, maybe not all, but there's those brands that really aspire to get there. And those are the ones who are going to, I think, be stronger in the future and drive better customer experience. As we've seen, customer experiences and customer engagement is more important than price for consumers. And so those companies and brands that are investing in that recognize the importance of community and building that relationship with users, and even in their employee side as well, because the employee experience affects your customer experience. And so being able to close the gap on, what if you've hired someone new in 2020 and they don't even know how tall you are because we've been sitting down at our desk virtually, to be able to build relationships, learn from each other through the community, drives better customer experience as well. So I think it's going to continue to mature, and I think the businesses and brands that are focused on where they aspire to be with their self-service, making it, really building a center of excellence around community and other self-service initiatives, making it a differentiator for their business, focus on those visions and aspirations are really going to be the game changer for them. I think you're muted, Jim.
Great. Thank you.
That had to happen once. That's how it had to happen.
Maximo, thoughts on culture and being successful with community?
Yes, I will probably talk more from the employee experience perspective, although from the customer experience perspective is also very interesting. From the employee, what we've seen, especially in the last year, was that suddenly top management losing the fear to kind of get into this community and social tools, sometimes recording a quick video with their phone, their mobile phone, and really jumping into this concept of sharing in communities with very fresh formats, something that they probably felt uncomfortable with a few years ago, but now the circumstances really require this type of quick, efficient, and I would say human communication during tough times. So that became for us a sign of a very replicable good practice, because at the end, it's difficult sometimes to do that, but it's very, very effective and pushes the needle and shows the way for how we can work better together if we are more authentic, if we are more present, if we are more open, more transparent. That helps a lot.
I think it's all good advice. We're getting close to the time where we're going to take questions from folks in attendance, but I have one more question that I want to ask, and it's related. I mean, technology has changed a lot. User behavior has changed a lot, and what we're seeing more and more, and one example is Slack, is this mobile first / appifying of experiences. And so I'm wondering if you guys as community platforms are thinking about creating an app, how you think about mobile as, more millennials are getting into the workforce and starting to expect that they can use their mobile device to do almost everything. And so, Jen, why don't you kick us off here?
Oh, yeah, I think this is an interesting question and topic because, when you look at kind of the behavior of Slack, right? It's not a social network yet. There's a ton of networking happening on it. And it's really about just exchanging communication quickly with your peers. And so it makes for a very interesting and exciting forum. I think the user behavior there is going to continue. And, why wouldn't we embrace that approach and not try to force a different behavior on consumers? So, fish where the fish are and really kind of think through and approach that with, open. The thing that's really interesting about Slack as well is it's a ton of user generated content where you're not necessarily searching for information, but you go out and ask because there's not, it's a temporary thing. So you don't have a lot of, archive of information as well, unless you're paying for it, I guess. But I do think it's really interesting. So people just ask their questions and then they get responses and, you lose some control. But like, as Maximo was talking about, we start to see, a little more risk tolerance in being able to support that sort of conversation and communication and making sure that we want to, be where our consumers want to be. So, I don't think it's going away, but I think it's something we embrace.
And are you guys doing a lot in the mobile
Yes.
area, like from Verint perspective? Yeah, cool.
Have to be there.
Maximo?
Well, I mean, for us that work a bit more on the employee side of things, again, you need to be aware that you are competing with the world out there. I mean, and even more when you're working from home and the context is different. So what will an employee do if they have 5 minutes and they're having a coffee? Read the news in the local newspaper or the national newspaper in their app, or the news in the internet, the internal news. So we need to make our content as mobile, as short, as sweet, as engaging, as visual than all these apps do. We actually, in our product, we copy or mimic some of the techniques that advertising is using very effectively in these apps to push internal comms messages, to balance this we give our users a lot of pull in their newsfeed, but we push and we inject some content. So that's something that we keep an eye on the consumerization of this. More related to Slack and always in the employee experience side of things. It was funny for me at some point because I saw Slack as something very beneficial for many, many things, also with Microsoft Teams, but also some danger somehow about these platforms that force you to think or have a conversation one line at a time. And I kind of miss this kind of old school formats like forums or Q&As, or I kind of miss the Quora compared to the Slack if we are in the consumer world. Because sometimes things to be valuable on the long run, they need a bit more time. They need a format that is a bit more expansive, that is probably asynchronous, that doesn't make you think one line at a time. And I still remember that being in an article, I think it was from Basecamp. They were kind of reacting at that time by the Slack taking by storm the enterprise. And I think they said like chat and messaging is like sauna. It's healthy for 15 minutes, but you don't want to spend your whole day there. And that really
That's a good one.
With what we see.
It's a great analog. James, I'll give you the last word.
I get the last word. I guess for me, great descriptions. I'm sort of picking up on it, so I'll steal some. Really, for me, the notion of Slack and those types of tools are really centered on a point in time, like what I'm thinking in the spur of the moment. What do I need? Whereas a community lives on. That thing, that event that did start in a point of time now has a life and it carries on. The conversation grows, the knowledge grows. And then we also have other ways to, as Maximo pointed out, you can call them classical, you can call them whatever you want to call them, but ultimately it's a place where more than just the started conversations there's more things that build up to the answer for that person. And there's also more relevant information from different data sources. I do see though, like this year we've been building a brand new mobile experience. And for the first time, we're building it in the context of what you would expect in a mobile world. So a lot of us in software have always built, let's talk responsive, let's build it in the mobile world. You should be able to go to one or the other and they should feel the same. In reality, a lot of users don't expect that. They expect the mobile experience to be, I'm using my BlackBerry thumbs, but you get the idea, right? That you expect those things to come up in a more feed-like notion. And I think there is going to be a bridging where we will start to provide more experiences that those types of experience can be complementary. But I agree with Maxim. I think you're ultimately, when you want to drill in, you want to go look at a resource center, you want to look through 1,000 videos, you're probably going to go to somewhere that has a much more robust experience built for that.
I appreciate that. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how you guys continue to evolve your technology platforms and kind of embrace some of these issues that we've talked about today. I want to thank James, Jen, and Maximo for taking their time today, and we are going to go to audience questions now. All right, I'm going to come off mute now. I'm asking John and Maximo. It doesn't look like James is online with us right now, but we've got John and Maximo here. John is from Verint, replacing Jen, and we're going to get to some questions. It looks like we did talk a little bit about AI, and Maximo, you were able to. Looks like you answered in there, but I'm interested in just digging in a little bit more. What's kind of the how should community managers get started with AI? And hold on just a minute. There we go. How should they get started with AI? Do they start on the use case, or do they just start deploying tools?
Yeah. Well, I quickly jotted an answer there. Basically, start on the use case. That's my advice. It's very easy to get lost by just looking at the possibilities of AI. You kind of never stop getting things that you can do or promises, but try to stay very close to your specific needs. Try to keep it simple and be narrow on what you are trying to achieve. and expand from there. For example, in our bot technology, we only support a few specific intents. That's the AI term for the use case. So we only support a few intents, but we try to nail them and try to really think about any possible ways that the conversations can go. But we can only do that for a few intents. And we have some fallbacks and we have some ways for the bot interaction to say, hey, look, this is a bit too complex for me. Maybe there is an app for that you can use or something else. So the more you are narrow, for example, in using a bot technology and you focus on very specific use case, the better the user satisfaction will be at the end. That will be my advice. Think about what you are really trying to achieve and then see what you can pick and choose from the available AI.
Great. Thank you. John, do you have thoughts on AI at Verint?
Sure. So start simple. Start simple with the intents that you are seeing emerge, right? So what are people searching for and finding, but also more importantly, what are they searching for and not finding, right? That's a pretty powerful thing to look for in your insights. But using AI to engage people, to bring them back to the community, to recommend people and content to them based on behaviors is important, to connect to the right people, to the right content at the right time. But also, we believe it's important to start to help the user understand things like, hey, look, you're typing this in and there's a good chance you're going to get blocked because you're approaching the moderation rule, right? So just helping them learn the paces of the community to use AI to do that. So start small, get some results, and then build it out from there.
Awesome. Thank you. I think, there's a couple other questions in there around AI. I think the best thing to do is to kick off a thread on the Tech Thursday site so that we can dive into this more. There is a question I want to get to. Maximo, you were talking about using profiles when you're developing personalization. And the question was around, what are some of the specific personalization actions that both Beezy and Verint are thinking about implementing in 2022?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as I said before, we are trying to. So AI is starting to deliver on the promise in many aspects. For example, because we work a lot on the Microsoft platform, there's starting to be very reliable API calls and services, AI services, that will, for example, make us understand very easily what an article is about. So imagine internal comms is writing an article. As they write the article, we can quickly launch every minute or so a query to understand what this article is about. And now, once we understand what this person is writing about, maybe we can connect that with, an image library of vetted corporate images, right? This, what is normally called MDM, management of digital assets, sorry, MDM. So before the author of that news finishes to write the news, we can already be suggesting some pictures that will be very good for illustrating the news or being used as a roll-up image in our very visual product. So those are the kind of things that we are starting to see really working and making the life of content creators very easy. Another example will be self-tagging or auto-tagging, understanding really what a content is about and work in the background to organize this information as users get their work done every day.
Thank you. And John, any thoughts on profiles and personalization?
No, I think all those are very valid points, right? I think once you get people to realize the power of their own personal profile, the better, right? So encouraging them to complete that, share with the rest of the community what they're open to share. And then you start getting data points that you can start connecting the dots with. So good points.
It looks like we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I think we've gone through most of the questions. We'll continue the conversations on TechThursdays2021.com. So if you're not registered there yet, please do. I want to thank Maximo and John for joining us for the Q&A. I want to thank all three partners for taking part in the panel last week, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone that joined us today on a future Tech Thursdays event. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.